Thank you. Welcome to the City of Antioch's special meeting. I will turn it over to our city clerk for roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a roll call for a special meeting study session for city council members. Councilmember Wilson?
Here.
Councilmember Thorpe?
Here.
Councilmember Ogerchuk?
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Motts?
I am here.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
All present.
I'll ask Councilmember Ogerchuk to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we are here to go over the presentation of the draft 5-year capital improvement program. I'll turn it over to City Manager Ron Bernal.
Thank you, Mayor Wright and members of the City Council. Our project manager, Scott Bunting, and assistant engineer, Tracy Tope, who worked hard on preparing this capital improvement program, will be making this presentation. But first of all, I just wanted to give you all a brief overview. This is a 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP, that takes us through 2024. What you'll be focused on in this presentation specifically is the next fiscal year, which is the 1920, because that's the part that will be funded through the budget process. The Planning Commission has already heard this, as has the Parks and Recreation Commission. So what you're doing is hearing a draft plan today that's gone through the Planning Commission for compliance with the general plan, and for the Parks and Recreation Commission related to the parks and recreation type projects. And then what you'll be doing is considering the entire capital improvement program. This is an informal process, so feel free to ask any questions you want along the way, and then the final version of this will be brought back to you for adoption in June. So I'll turn this over to Scott and Tracy, and they can walk you through the plan.
Sure, thank you. Mayor, City Council, Tracy and I are pleased to be presenting tonight the 5-year capital improvement program. This is a document put together through the Capital Improvement Division. We consult with various departments and divisions within the city, get the recommendations, get the funding sources squared away, include them in this package, and something we can go over tonight. Go ahead. Capital Improvement Program consists of a number of different program categories: community facilities, parks and trails, roadway improvements, traffic signals, wastewater and storm drain, water systems, and at the bottom you'll see the brackish water desal. That's been separated. It's a large project, currently not funded. We're working with the state to get that low interest loan secured. Funding sources, again, there's a number of them. The general fund, capital improvement funds, enterprise funds. We'll go over these a little bit more in depth here in a couple slides. And then also we've got the brackish water desal. The brackish water desal plant, as well as the Lone Tree improvements, are currently unfunded, so they're listed separately from these funding sources. A little bit more in depth with the funding source. Capital improvement funds consists of a number of funds: the assessment districts, as well as the annexation fund for the northeast improvements, and drainage area. Currently 55 is the one that we've been utilizing for the West Antioch Creek project. Also, enterprise funds are our franchise fees, as well as water and sewer fund, and then the water and sewer system improvement funds. Number of grants that we have worked with and are currently working on: Cal Recycle, a grant that's been funding a portion of our Cape Seal program; community block grant within the capital improvement program. We've utilized this to do most of the street work and improvements in the downtown area over the last number of years. The One Bay Area grant program, that OBAG 2 grants, currently we've secured for L Street, as well as some work on Buchanan and Gentrytown. And then TDA grants have been utilized for work around the middle school, Antioch Middle School. Special revenue funds, first three: the gas tax, Measure J, RMA. Those are designated for roadway improvements. NPDS funds for storm drain channel improvements. Park and Lieu, Delta Fair funds have funded improvements to our parks. Marina Fund and Rural 20A Fund are also included within this category. So far this year, we've completed a number of projects. The solar The solar system being placed up at the Lone Tree Golf Course has been installed. Currently waiting for PG&E to replace the transformer so it can be fully energized. Improvements to Pruitt Park consisted of rebuilding the concrete, some of the concrete in that park area. A lot of it has failed just due to age. Pedestrian AD improvements that installed a little over 100 handicap ramps, accessible ramps within the city. The Antioch Middle School crosswalk safety improvement program was done on D Street. I don't know if you've gone down there recently. We installed a flashing crosswalk in the area as well as a number of additional signs to try to make it a little bit more apparent that, hey, there's a school and beware or be wary of the kids. Did some additional street lighting on the western side of Carpinteria in an area that had been relatively dark. The West Antioch Creek improvements, the project is wrapped up, and that was to widen the channel between approximately 8th and 10th Street. And then a water main replacement project on Fawn Hill that replaced an aging line that had failed a number of times, and that project is now completed. For right now, a number of things that are in the works. The Marina Launch Ramp restroom, the project has been awarded. The facility has currently been purchased. We're just waiting for it to be delivered, and then construction on that will start. The City Council remodel is actually something that we'll be considering tonight at the council meeting. That will be a complete interior remodel of this facility, as well as enclosing the breezeway and doing some work to the to the room adjacent to HR. Murals and the utility box artwork, a couple of new projects that will hopefully beautify the city in some manner. And we're also going to be converting the tennis courts over at Contra Loma Estates into basketball courts. The L Street Improvement Project is just getting underway. We've solicited for a consultant to get on board to help with the design, the right-of-way, and other things that will be necessary to complete that project. Sewer main trenchless rehabilitation, that's a project. There's a large sewer main on the eastern side of the city. Had some issues a while back. It's in need of rehabilitation. Those specifications have been completed. They'll go through a final review. That project should be out relatively soon. The Northeast Annexation Infrastructure Improvement Project has commenced construction. They've gone out there and exposed a lot of the underground utilities. That project will be installing a sewer line down Wilbur, as well as down Vieira and the associated streets, and then also bringing domestic water to that recently incorporated area. Disinfection improvements over at the water treatment plant. Currently getting ready to switch over from chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite. The next phase of that will be swapping over from the ammonia gas to liquid ammonia sulfate. Project's been in the works for a little bit. Will be a good improvement to the facility. The James Donlan pump station, as well as the Hillcrest pump station, we just recently got a contractor on board. Design of those projects will start. They'll be designed simultaneously, bid out simultaneously. Excuse me. It will involve adding a pump to one location, rehabilitating a lot of the controls within both, doing any sort of seismic related improvements to the facilities. And then here you'll see the brackish water desalination project, which we've talked a number of times about. It's still in the works. We're working hard on the funding side of it, as well as agreements with Delta Diablo and moving forward with permitting of the project. New projects that entered the CIP this year. The concrete over at Pruitt Park, this project in particular will replace the main stairway in between the two water slides. Last year we did additional concrete improvements in the area near the lap pool and the tad pool over there. There is another item to do additional deck coating out there. The facility is just aging and needs some work out there. And then some work at the RV storage area to do some work on the fencing to try to make that a little bit more secure. Hard house rehabilitation. Basically, it's a preservation of that building is now part of the CIP. We'll be restoring fountains, the fountain over at Davidson, Hillcrest, Deer Valley, as well as the fountain at the police department. We'll also be looking to install a new fountain, the Leo Fontana fountain, which will be out just outside the council chambers, in between the council chambers and City Hall, near the steps. Put in a fountain, try to do some nice things out there for Leo Fontana. You'll see the murals and the utility box artwork. Those are projects, again, that will hopefully beautify the city, establishing a program that at least gets it started. The same thing with the preservation of public art, to try to do some things to beautify the city. We have money scheduled for a number of playgrounds. Chichibu Park, Jacobson Park, McKetty Park. We'll all be seeing improvements to the playground areas. We'll also be installing some signs, some wayfinding signs to help people get around the city. Media improvements is something that's going to be big over the next couple years. This will include installing additional stamp colored concrete, putting in trees and bushes, replanting a lot of stuff, trying to, again, beautify the roadways. A couple new programs, traffic calming program, curb painting program, will be things that we'll be, through capital, be organizing and moving forward with. Lastly, we do have some money for some utility undergrounding. That would be Rule 20A money that we are looking to utilize within the next couple of years. And then a new traffic signal at the intersection of Laurel and Canada Valley. Currently, not a whole lot of traffic there. They are moving forward with the Laurel connection between Highway 4 and Hillcrest. When that gets opened, this intersection will become heavily traveled, and it would be a good idea to get a traffic signal out there. That's a brief overview of what we've got in our CIP. I know that you guys have had the draft CIP for a little while. If you have any questions regarding the presentation or any particular projects, I would be more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Thorpe.
So the L Street corridor, so there's no funding for it.
There is some funding.
Some funding
We
for
do
grants.
we have a OBAG 2 grant for $1.65 million.
And then you're applying for a new grant.
We're continuing to apply for another grants, yes.
So is there a I guess a master plan that's associated with the L Street corridor that can phase it in, so that rather than waiting, we can maybe think through how we can use general fund money to phase this process in, because
Sure.
this is it's taking too long.
Well, like I said, we've got a consultant that's on board right now. They'll start doing some of the right-of-way and preliminary design. Phasing it in is possible. Some of the grant money that we have it relates to landscaping and other things. So once we do get a plan, get the right-of-way established, there's some things that need to be purchased in order to do the widening itself. We need to pass underneath the railroad tracks also, so there's a little bit of a complication there too. But once we get that laid out, it could be phased in such that you do some underground work first, come through with the street and some of the concrete work, and then follow that up with landscaping.
Oh, okay.
So you can phase these in. We would like to have it all go at once.
Right.
And we'll kind of have to see how the design process goes, if there's any complications with, like I say, acquiring property, working with the various utilities, or the railroad tracks.
Right. It would be nice to see just an overall plan of, because and when I say it's moving too slow, it's not you. I get the constraints. There aren't any money, and we're planning on grants, and so, but even if you get this grant, there's still a significant portion of money that's missing, and so I hate that these things linger around. In addition to that, since we're talking about the L Street improvements, just for not for the upcoming CIP budget, but just overall to include other corridors similar to L Street in the CIP. As an example, A Street would be something I'd like to see on the CIP.
Sure, and you're going to see some improvements out there. Part of the median island improvements are going to be in these areas. You know, A Street is pretty well built out in terms of the infrastructure there. I believe, or I think what you're saying is some of the beautification to it, correct?
Right, some of the beautification, something like and we had talked about some of this as we were talking about the wayfinding discussion, like a streetscape master plan that's associated with some of these major corridors, because I get some of the landscaping, but there's just still a lot more that can be done, and it'd be nice to see it in a more comprehensive plan.
Okay.
That if we don't have all the money today, you know, maybe we can think through how we can phase these projects in over time, or break them up in so that we can phase them in and pay for them, whether it's to the general fund or budget reserve money. We got to figure out how we get some of this beautification done.
Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
You know, I'm just going to add to that because, you know, frankly, we've just got some arterials, especially in North Antioch, that, you know, they just look terrible. You know, coming down from off of Lone Tree Way and under the freeway and entering into North Antioch and A Street, it's like you've entered a different city. I know there's some improvements right around the Highway 4 there, but honestly, all the way down A Street is just, it's been decades since I think there's been much investment and improvement. And frankly, that's a pretty vibrant business area that is overlooked. Unfortunately, there's, you know, a lot of commerce, I think, that happens around that area. And I also think the 10th Street corridor from G Street to L Street is just very bad. We should be looking at some of these older parts of the community that haven't had investment for, you know, 30, 40 plus years. I would like to see that as part of that. Councilmember Thorpe is talking about is a master plan added to this CIP and how we start addressing some of these arterials that are frankly just been neglected for years. I also have a request too, and this is part of our visioning and strategy planning work study session where we, you know, kind of strategically point through them and prioritize some items that we wanted to bring forth. And one of those was the dirt lot at the corner of 2nd and E Street, which is commonly known as the yard for many people in the community. And I would request that that be added to the CIP to look at funding for that site for at the basic minimum of irrigation and grass for that site.
Councilmember Wilson.
I didn't know she was done.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I have two questions for you. One more of a broader question, but I do want to add to the arterials, if we can also add 18th Street, specifically between Hillcrest and A Street. That corridor, I think we need to I think we definitely need to take a look at that and how we can improve that corridor as well. But circling back, this is more overall, I'm just, and you know, unfortunately, Mr. Blank's not here, but when he was here a couple weeks ago talking about the mission vision for Public Works, he really talked about a clean and green Antioch being efficient, safe, sustainable, and really the capital improvement plan really comes out of Public Works. So I really would like to have a better understanding under a 5-year plan, what is the mission vision of this plan? Like what, you know, what is the goal of where you're trying to get to? Because right now it just looks like a list of things that need to get done. But I'm just really curious what the vision of the current CIP plan.
Well, it's the same mission that John was talking about. It's this be clean and green. On the capital side, though, it's also to provide well-maintained facilities. We do, as you said, work with Public Works on the side of their maintenance, the larger jobs. Where you have failures, whether they're in roads or utility lines, is where capital would step in. So part of our deal is to try to be proactive with Public Works, with the water department, the sewer department, as well as streets, to try to get ahead of this a little bit when it comes to main replacements or road rehabs, to try to catch them a little bit sooner. to try to be a little bit more, like I said, proactive when we come to street repairs. You'll see a microsurfacing project that will be coming out later on this year, as well as some other street repairs and curb ramp projects. So really it's to try to be a little bit more proactive than we have been in the past, to try to catch things before, say, they get, like streets, they get too carried away.
Okay, and that's good. And also I really liked what Councilmember Thorpe was talking about. How do we get some of these projects where we can start phasing things in instead of going, well, L Street, for example, we won't have the funding until 2021, or, this project, we won't have enough money till, how do we, I think that's really something you guys need to take in consideration with the vision, like, okay, here we are, how do we start phasing some of these things in? We may not have the money now, but how do we phase it in to get it up and going and getting it done?
Yeah, and I agree. We're going to be bringing on another engineer within the Capital Improvements Division within the next few weeks. That will be helpful for us to try to get more projects out. Funding has its issues. Some of these projects are rather small where funding's not so much of an issue. A lot of the beautification that you guys are talking about will come as part of the median landscaping program. You'll be seeing that will do a lot of replanting of these medians and probably spruce some of these areas up quite a bit. And in terms of getting a landscape master plan together, it's something we can look into to try to get a landscape architect on board to build off of what we have. A lot of our medians are different. We don't necessarily have a single type of plant that's there. So to bring somebody in to try to spruce things up, the maintenance yard can do a pretty good job at that. They've gotten more proactive also in terms of more frequently trimming and also doing some replanting.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, Scott, could I ask you to please speak into the microphone? We're not picking you up on the recording.
Okay.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Yeah, so in that same, so we're adding things to this list, and I want to be cognizant of the fact that you probably have limited staff. Can you remind me of how much staff is in the CIP?
This is it. I'm project manager down there. Tracy's the assistant engineer, or an assistant engineer down there. Lori Medeiros is our administrator. Sal Rodriguez does our drafting. That's the extent of staff that we have in capital improvements.
Okay.
We do have a couple public works inspectors that do take care of the work in the field, but in terms of delivery, management, and grant searching for projects, it's Tracy and me.
Okay. I understand. Thank you. And, no, that was it. That's it.
Mayor Pro Tem Watts.
Just a couple questions. So some of these projects I know are things since I've been on the council, that have been brought forward, but and maybe you can inform me. So the restoration of public art and some of these other projects, these were brought forth by council prior, or is this, how are we making determination on needs?
Yes, these were brought forward by council.
Okay. And then something that I'd actually forgotten about, because I tried to bring it up during the staffing budget session, and I was reminded that this should be more of the CIP, is the Nick Rodriguez Community Center, especially surrounding the Cedar and all. We've had some conversations, and actually the senior center, it's been there a very long time. Has there been a needs assessment made for that? Are there improvements? Is that a project that you're looking at? And maybe this is something Nancy Kaiser can also fill in a little bit too, if this is, because I know there's been some challenges there, especially in the theater with some safety issues. So
Currently don't have anything for the Nick Rodriguez Center that was within this CIP for the next couple years. Once we go out a few years, there could very well be some items that would end up being added.
Okay, so when you do an assessment of buildings that are owned by the city and all, I'm assuming that happens annually, and you make decisions based on what's going on, how long it's been since there's been upgrades or updates?
Sure. Within our facilities department, they take care of those. They do look at these buildings. The city owns a number of structures within the city. As to the needs of, say, Nick Rodriguez or any of the other facilities, as part of the capital improvement program process, we ask whether it's parks or whether it's streets, what it is that they need. And then we get something back from them. If it's painting of a building, a new roof that needs to be put in, something like that. And then there needs to be a funding source that's associated with that. So there can be lots of projects, but then there's lots of needs. It's trying to make sure that that matches up. Some of these facility needs that you're talking about, really your funding source ends up being the general fund, and there's a lot of competition for those funds.
Absolutely. And so maybe Director Kaiser can inform me a little bit about this, because I know we had and this really has a lot to do with what we're talking about in reinvigorating Nick Rodriguez for its original purpose in supporting recreational services for our youth in North Antioch, and some of the other things we need to do there that support the seniors. And then the fact that we have a theater there, and whether that's been some of the challenges we've had with upgrades and improvements have been looked at. Maybe you could speak to that.
Thank you. Good evening, Nancy Kaiser, Parks and Recreation Director, Mayor, members of the council. Many of the things that we're talking about with regards to both the Antioch Senior Center and the Nick Rodriguez Community Center are operational and maintenance addressed. It's not a capital improvement per se. It's not completely tearing down a building or putting on a new roof. It is repairing, what is there at the facility. As you heard Mr. Bunting say, this is one of our oldest facilities in the community. So that is what we're doing, is we're systematically each year addressing the repairs that need to take place in the entire complex. So it is a community center complex. All of the buildings are connected by hallways that people get lost in, but it is one big complex. The City Council provided one-time revenues in this fiscal year for significant repairs to the facility, and we're checking those off monthly. Right now we are focusing on the restrooms, so all of the restrooms in the entire complex are getting some attention. That project should start this week. Also included painting the outside of the building, adding carpet to the senior center lobby and hallway, things like that. So we're working on, again, those maintenance issues to address the building. Our facilities department has really given us a lot of attention since we've been examining the facility, and they are in painting, safety painting on the steps for visibility. So the stairwells, looking at the ADA ramps, fixing the doors in between the various rooms of the building. So there's just some of the projects we're working on right now that address operations and maintenance. We've also had a couple of new items come to our attention from our theater users, and we've addressed those right away, again, because they address safety. The smell of gas. It took nearly 2 days for PG&E and our contractors to find it. It was deep into the system, and when you talk to existing staff, they said it's been like that for 15, 20 years. So not to say that makes it right, but that was an interesting mystery that we've solved, and we've repaired lighting above the stage, things like that. So it's, as it comes to our attention, as we assess it each year, we are checking it off the list. On the Nick Rodriguez side, again, one-time revenues supported purchasing upgraded maintenance equipment so we can clean the floors better, we can give it some more attention. The number one recommendation that we have included in this 5-year CIP that you can see 3 or 4 years out is repairing and replacing, actually, the floor in the dining hall of the senior center. We've recognized that as the highest need because of use. We have on average 50 to 125 seniors there daily. It is an original wood block floor, and those individual pieces are starting to pop through age, settlement, if we have water leaks, and that we've deemed as our highest priority. But you've all been in the dining hall, that is a tremendous amount of square footage, and it's not just a laminate, it's all individual wood pieces, again, in wood squares throughout that entire dining hall. So next up on the list is the linoleum countertops on both the senior center side and the community center side. Those will be done starting towards the middle of May. So, any other questions about our community center complex? All right, thank you.
Thank you. We do have a public comment. Lee Ballesteros.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Lee Ballesteros. I'm representing the Drama Factory, one of the drama theater company users of the Nick Rodriguez Theater. It's great to hear that a lot of stuff is being done down there, although Ms. Kaiser did say that they look at the facility as a single conglomerated facility being the senior and community center. It is distinctly two separate buildings, and I understand how it's looked at, but it is funded in two separate ways. The facility is the Nick Rodriguez Community Center and Theater and the Senior Center. So as far as the capital improvements are concerned for the theater, most of it is maintenance. I do get that, but I noticed on the CIP report that we have for beautification of the city, the murals and utility box artwork as two separate items totaling at about $150,000. If we could kind of lump that into one and maybe take a little of that money off to put into things that the theater itself actually does need as an improvement, that would be fabulous, because this is something that we're putting forward as a face of Antioch. It is a rented facility. People pay to come in and do whatever it is that they're doing in the theater. And for someone to come in and see that there is, aging seats, there are no dedicated disability seats or seating area for the theater. There is basically, when people in wheelchairs come to see our shows, they get put in the aisle in the front row. Which they do fit there, but if we have more than two, well, then we're basically full. So there are things that we've addressed over the 5 years that the Drama Factory has been in there. But if we could possibly get some of the money moved around a little bit, so not just the repairs, but maybe a little bit of an upgrade, a marquee out front would let people know that there's a theater downtown. Most people don't know that. They look at the Campanile and we're like, no, there's a community theater that has community events. And, this is wish list stuff, but a marquee would be something that would really, really benefit that, or some of the upgrades that need to be done in the theater. And we're available anytime, as you know, for any questions about that. And I really do appreciate the fact that Nancy has really been proactive about listening to our concerns as far as safety, and we really, really do appreciate that. And hopefully it'll be a facility that will work for the community for a considerable amount of time in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
None received.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you. I had one last question on parks and trails, which is great that the parks that definitely need some work are included in this. My question is more on the trails piece. I know we have a multiple amounts of trails going throughout our city, which is great. Some of the trails we maintain, other trails East Bay Regional Parks maintains, and then East Bay Mud takes care of the remaining trails. I know in our strategic plan, when the council sat down and talked about strategic plan, mobility was one of the issues, or one of the things that we wanted to focus on, how people get about, around our city, and trails plays a major part in that. Are we going to at one point start looking at trails overall and how they fit into this picture?
Yeah, we currently look at that. There'll be an item this evening that discusses the repaving of the trails around Hillcrest Park. The concrete program that installs curb ramps is very beneficial for helping people get around. Oftentimes those are connected to trails also. Most of the trails, like you said, they're not city maintained, and there are some smaller ones in some subdivisions that we can definitely take a look at getting into and doing similar to what we're doing over at Hillcrest, where it's just an overlay of the existing asphalt trail.
I think what more or less I'm looking for is maybe a plan for our trails, and maybe that might involve us sitting down with East Bay Regional Parks and East Bay Mud to say, hey, these are all the trails running. What is our goal 5 years down the road with in regards to our trails? I think, I'd like to see eventually a plan in regards to our trails that come through our city.
That's definitely something that we can look into.
Anything else? If there's nothing else, thank you. Any other comments?
The only thing I could ask for maybe a little bit more information on is related to the additional items that have been added to the CIP. what's the council's kind of desire on timing of those things? Because what we've heard is, looking at a lot of additional corridors in addition to L Street. So is that a matter of taking the L Street funding and kind of spreading it over everywhere else so that we end up with more of a universal look of the city and all of our arterial streets and beautifying them? Related to the yard request, is that something that we want to go in the next year or two? Is that something that we want to be out 4 or 5 years? Because this all affects the general fund, or a lot of these asks affect the general fund. And so as we're putting together our 5 to 7 year budget lookout, if we're going to be programming more general fund money in and looking at the fact that we want to try to maintain a balanced budget, it would be nice to get a little bit more direction from the council on what sort of timing you all would like to see.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily looking for a timeline. I think I was more interested in what we can do, and similar to the wayfinding, we're going to go out, do a bid, and do someone to contract and do a master plan, and then we're going to look at what over time what it looks like. So I don't think it's a matter of budgeting something in now, just looking at how we can get plans together that phase things in, so that then as we discuss the budget, not specifically for this budget, but in years on, how we phase these projects in. And if there's funding available through the general plan, we can do it that way. If there's grant opportunities out there, we can do it that way. The mayor's always talking about his relationship with our state legislators, and that there's really never an ask. This is what creates the ask. So that's what I was looking for.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
In regards to the yard, I think, this has been a dirt lot, that corner, for, I don't know, a very long time, maybe 30 years, maybe longer. And I think that the fact that we brought this forward as one of our priorities, our top 10 or 11, if I can't remember exactly what it was, is something we wanted to work out, and it's clearly is, I think, something the community is interested in. I would like to see at least, some planning money for this year, and, taking a look at that at the very least, because I know we have to bring this all back, correct? To take a look at, what the bottom line is. So I would like to at least to be included, maybe some initial seed money to look at what it would take to provide irrigation and grass for that area, something that, honestly, the mayor and I asked about 10 years ago, maybe, when we first started talking about that piece of property. And there was of course, a different city manager at that time. But so that would be my request. And I don't know what that dollar figure looks like. Maybe it's $50,000. I don't know. But I would like to maybe possibly get some information. Maybe John's not here tonight. He could give me some information about, what that would look like as far as a price tag to do something like that on that property. So that's my request.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Oberchuk.
On the yard or the A and 2nd Street, I think that Mayor Pro Tem Motz is correct. We have it on the list of 12 that we had. And I know there was time frames that we had put, like what we wanted to see from 1 to 3, 3 to 5. And I don't know where that fell into the timing of that. But I'd also like to see, before we spend money to put grass and irrigation there, what the intent of that property is going to be. That's just me personally, to see what's going to be the final outcome of that parcel.
Okay. Just related, my understanding of the timeframes that council had placed on all of those projects, we got rid of all of those and just made them one big list of 12 projects. So there is no priority one over the other at this point, is my understanding.
Well, then maybe we should look back at that list and see how to prioritize that, because we can't do all 12 of them like right now. So maybe it's something that we need to look at and prioritize which one's the top one.
That we can come back with that. And then the other document that actually does prioritize it is exactly what we're talking about here tonight, is a CIP, when we put timelines to funding, so that is council's desire.
But again, I don't know that, I don't want to put $50,000 on a piece of property, a parcel, when then all of a sudden that may not be the final piece what's going to happen with that property.
Sure. What, to Council Member Motts or Mayor Pro Tem Motts ask, it would take a landscape architect or somebody, we'd have to enter into a contract just to do due diligence on what it would take to irrigate and just put lawn. I mean, it'd probably cost 25 grand just to even come up with an idea of a cost estimate of what it would take to do all that work. So I think I have enough direction at this point, or we have enough direction at this point to be able to come back with something at the next round of this.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Yeah, I agree. We got rid of the priorities, but I thought that there was still timelines. It wasn't that we had timelines based on we want to do this first because it's highest priority. It's because there are some things that took multiple years. Mm-hmm. So I thought it kind of correlated nicely to, hey, it could happen next year. It could happen 5 years from now. It could happen 10 years from now. So I'm not sure we still need to put priority one. They're all things that are going to have different timelines, not necessarily based on whether or not they're the priority for right this very moment.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Motts.
And ultimately, when we were talking about this, years ago about the yard, the thought of the community that was pushing for this was that this would be a private public partnership, and that a lot of the money to create this space in our downtown, which we think is much needed for a community gathering place along our river and to create vibrancy, that it would be kind of a community build, and that there would be private partners that would be involved in also supporting that. This is city-owned land. It's going to we're going to have to start someplace if that's the direction we want to go in, and I don't know from the rest of council if that's what we want to do, but this is my request that we bring this forward and at least investigate what the cost would be to initiate this, and then we can make a decision when we make our final decisions as far as the budget goes. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
And I hope if that's something we could do, then we can look at those private partners that were willing to also support this effort at that time.
Sure, and that gets into a whole nother discussion, private, public, and prevailing wage, and a lot of other things. So it's going to take a bit of investigation to come back with a full report on what all it would take, what the options are.
Well, I just want to comment that we're already doing that. We're doing a private public partnership with Celebrate Antioch in order to put on community events. So I don't see. We're already doing this type of work, and I think going forward is probably the most efficient and financially the only way that the city can really move forward on doing some of these projects that we really want to try to do.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into whether it's going to be a this or that or a park or condos or whatever. I think we've all sat for a long time watching this plot of land as dirt. And so irrespective of what it will one day be, I think we're tired of just looking at the dirt. And so I think I'm agreeable to what you're suggesting, to the point of just filling it with grass in the interim until something happens. Because other than functioning as a parking lot during the parade, there is no other function for it. And so I'm fine. I'm personally fine with the grass and whatever it takes to get grass up there, because this was something that we were trying to do, or excuse me, they were trying to do 10 years ago. And since I came here, now on our third year, we've been talking about something's going to happen, and it's going to be tomorrow, and we're still sitting here almost 3 years later, nothing's happened. So I think I'm agreeable to just focusing on getting grass up there, and whatever happens after that is for a later time. Right now, let's just focus on the grass.
Does that give you
Sure.
enough direction?
Correct.
Ultimately, to spend some money, you're going to have to come back and ask. Is that
Absolutely,
right?
and it's going to involve maintenance. It's going to, there's other costs than just the initial cost of installing the grass. But we just need to get our arms around what that project looks like, and so I think we have enough information to come back with something for the CIP.
Very good. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, this meeting stands adjourned. I'd like to welcome everybody out to the Antioch City Council meeting this evening. I will call this meeting to order. Turn it over to City